Okay, so today is our final class in the book of Exodus. We are reading actually a double portion today, Vayakhel Pikudei, and it starts at the chapter, where were we? Chapter 35, chapter 35 through 40, to the end. That's what we're reading this week. And so first of all, I wanted to really, more of what I do today, the chapter, the Torah portion itself has a great deal of repetition. We had two different Torah portions a few weeks ago, Truma and then Tetzaveh, that give us God's commandments of building the tabernacle. We had a lot of detail about how to build it and the vessels and all the different things. And we also had a lot of detail about the priests and the priestly garments and the menorah and all these different things, which we've discussed. And this Torah portion, which is, as I said, a double Torah portion, repeats most of that stuff again. But what actually has happened is that whereas the beginning, it's God's commandment to Moses, telling him what to do when he is up on Mount Sinai. And our Torah portion begins with Moses gathering the entire nation to convey to them the instructions that he had received from God with respect to the tabernacle, and then the actual building of the tabernacle itself. And the book of Exodus ends with the building of the tabernacle. So what I'd like to do today, first and foremost, is to kind of use this Torah portion as a way of focusing on what the whole book of Exodus is about. Now, when I named the series, for the book of Exodus, I called it The Restoration of Israel. And actually, that is a very obvious title for the first half of the book. We learn about the slavery and the suffering of the nation in Egypt, and immediately at the very beginning of the book already, starting in chapter 2, we learn about the birth of Moses. So together with the description of the suffering and the exile, we already have the seeds for the redemption. But once they leave Egypt and we have the parting of the Red Sea and all that is over, what's the rest of it about? Is that still involved in the restoration of Israel? Now, there's a very famous commentator, Jewish commentator from the Middle Ages, who we call the Ramban. That's actually an abbreviation of his name. He was Moses, the son of Nachman, or Nachmanides, as he's often called in English. And he gave names to, or he would refer to names. It's not clear if he gave the names or these were more ancient traditions. I think more ancient traditions for each of these books. Now, it's interesting, you probably are aware, that each of the 5 books of Moses is called today a name in Hebrew that actually just comes from one of the first few words of the book itself. So the book of Exodus in Hebrew is called Shmot. Shmot just means names. And it's because the first words of the book is, these are the names of, and it talks about the sons of Jacob, those who have gone down to Egypt. But the word Exodus, the English name, or more accurately, it's a kind of Latin name, Exodus, actually comes from an older tradition of what these books were called. Exodus, of course, means the deliverance, the leaving of Egypt. And what the Ramban says is he refers to this book as the book of exile and redemption, or exile and deliverance, okay? And again, this is a very, very appropriate title, as the title we use for our series, The Restoration of Israel, very appropriate title for the first half of the book. But the second half of the book is extremely involved in the building of the tabernacle, with a break in the middle. What we discussed last week is the sin of the golden calf. How does that connect? How do we continue this theme of restoration or redemption through the second half of the book? So first of all, let's go back and take one by one the events or the issues that we deal with in the book of Exodus once the Exodus is completed. Okay, the Red Sea is parted and they've left Egypt miraculously, and they are on their way into the desert, and everything is great. The next most important major event, of course, is the revelation at Sinai. We have a lot of detail about that. We have detail about Moses going up and his encounter with God and being up there for 40 days and 40 nights. We have detail about the preparations that the nation have to make, getting ready for this event. And we have the actual 10 Commandments and the whole event with all the sounds and the thunder and all this fireworks and stuff. We discussed this, of course. And I think here, the message here, as having this be the next event, is that when we talk about the restoration of Israel, or if we talk about the redemption, it is not enough to have a physical redemption. At the point at which they leave Egypt and they experience the parting of the Red Sea, and they leave the Egyptians behind, the Egyptians are defeated, they're drowned in the Red Sea, and the nation comes out free. What has happened is that they are physically free. They no longer are shackled by slaves, they are free of Egypt. But that's not enough. And I think what we have here by next focusing on Revelation at Sinai is that we cannot just have a physical restoration, we also have to have a spiritual restoration. And that is what we experience when we see Sinai. Now, let's just take a look at Exodus 14. We're going to be jumping around a bit today because I want to just kind of tie it all together. Exodus 14, verse 30. Now, these are the two verses I'm going to read here. The two verses that immediately precede the Song of Moses. This summarizes what just has happened. They have been saved by God from the Egyptians, and the next verse, of course, begins chapter 15, which is the Song of Moses. Let's read these verses. Thus the Lord delivered Israel that day from the Egyptians. Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the shore of the sea, and when Israel saw the wondrous power which the Lord had wielded against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord. They had faith in the Lord and his servant Moses. This then is the declared purpose of this restoration. It's not just, and we saw it before, by the way, and we discussed this in previous classes, many times when God set forward for Moses, what is his purpose? What's going to happen? The purpose for the 10 plagues, for example. There were two parallel purposes, so that Egypt should learn who God is, and so that the nation of Israel should learn who God is. But here we have it set forward together with this very concept of deliverance or salvation. Okay? 1 second. Here we have that it is the deliverance itself that creates the situation where the nation of Israel fears God and believes in God. And that is essential to what the picture is here, what the plan is, what God's plan is for Israel. Restoration must also include this element of faith. But even before then, let's go back and take a look at chapter 3. This is the chapter. This is where we see God first revealing himself to Moses and giving Moses that very first instruction to go to Pharaoh, and God is basically telling Moses at this point, you are going to be my emissary to deliver the nation of Israel. So let's see, where are we? Chapter 3, verse 12, okay? And this, of course, is part of Moses saying to God, I don't know, and they won't believe me, and what should I do, and give me a sign. And here God says something very fundamental. Verse 12, and he said, God, I will be with you. That shall be your sign, that it was I who sent you. And when you have freed the people from Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Now, these words, that shall be your sign, is a little bit confusing. It is not clear whether the fact of God being with Moses will be his sign, or whether the sign is that at the end of this whole process, you shall worship God at this mountain. Now, where's that mountain? Where God first instructs Moses, where the burning bush and all that is at Sinai. It's also called Horeb. Synonymous, these two places. It's the same place. And it is exactly the same mountain that is Sinai. And so basically, God already established as part of his plan, when he first sent Moses to save the nation, that you're going to come back here and the nation of Israel will come back to this very same mountain and worship God. And I like the idea that this is your sign. That the sign itself, to me, is not just a sign as in hocus pocus, I'm going to give you something magical. The sign becomes the theme. It becomes a guiding principle. The guiding principle of this whole Exodus is that they should come to Sinai and that they should there meet God and experience God's revelation at Sinai. So I would say from the very beginning, Sinai is clearly a part of the restoration of Israel. Now, after Sinai, we have the Tabernacle. Of course, we also have the golden calf, and I will deal with that as well. But the Tabernacle. Now, there's actually a discussion among Jewish commentaries. When exactly does the commandment for the tabernacle happen? Now, if you read in order, if you read the book of Exodus in order from beginning to end, the order is as follows. Moses, there's the revelation at Sinai, after which Moses goes up to the mountain, to Mount Sinai, for 40 days and 40 nights. While he is up there, God gives him all the commandments for the tabernacle. While he's up there, okay, at the end, the very last day or so, towards the end of his time up there, the golden calf happens down below. Moses is handed the 10 commandments, comes down, sees what happens, breaks the 10 commandments. Then we have the golden calf. Then after this whole process of repentance and Moses goes back up to Mount Sinai, etc., then we have the second series, the second set of 10 commandments, the tablets, the second tablets. And then Moses tells the nation about the tabernacle, they build the tabernacle. So according to this, the commandment for the tabernacle itself precedes the sin of the golden calf. This is the opinion of Ramban, and he therefore, using that chronology, he says that the tabernacle was something that God planned from the beginning. Why did you need the tabernacle? He says it is a continuation of Sinai. And I think we've referenced this a little bit in the past when we talked about the 10 commandments. But the picture that Mount Sinai, Moses goes up on Mount Sinai. Where does Moses go? He goes into the cloud. There's the cloud of glory that rests on Mount Sinai that somehow represents God's presence, but it is the cloud itself, let's say, symbolizes God's presence, but it also hides God's presence. Okay, it is a cloud. And once Moses goes up there, he can no longer be seen. And we talked also about how there was the incense in the tabernacle, which is brought. The incense altar stands just before the curtain that separates, or the division that separates the holy from the Holy of Holies. Beyond that curtain is the ark, is the Holy of Holies, and the importance in the incense altar of having this smoke screen. Okay, so again we have this. Somebody is making Martha. I think if you can mute. There we go. Okay. So you have this idea, and we talked about this before, in the tabernacle, where there's a certain separation, a certain distance, and this incense cloud of smoke, or a cloud in general, represents this separation between God and humanity. And so what Ramban is saying is he's taking the same idea of the relationship with God, God's presence with the cloud, the distance, together with the closeness, the ability to meet God, the ability to hear God's voice, and at the same time have this cloud that kind of separates you. That cloud then, that same cloud of glory is the cloud of glory that sits on the tabernacle. And so he sees this as something that God had previously planned as a way of taking the experience of the revelation of Sinai and carrying it on forever through the tabernacle at a lesser level. Okay, but this idea of having revelation at Sinai with us at some level, always through the tabernacle and then later through the temple. Another very, very important commentator, also from the Middle Ages, whose name is Rashi. Rashi has a tendency to, he feels very often that sometimes the text was really written out of chronological order. And he may give reasons why a certain order was preferred for thematic reasons, but that it's not necessarily in chronological order. When it comes to the tabernacle, he believes that the actual commandment for the tabernacle happens after the sin of the golden calf. And that it was actually told to Moses, not the first time he went up to Mount Sinai, but the second time he went up to Mount Sinai. And what does he gain from this? He gains from this that the sin of the golden calf reflected that the nation of Israel had a need. They had a need for something very concrete. They had a need to see and feel something. And what then God does in response to is by giving them the tabernacle. We already discussed last week the comparison between this idea of the tabernacle and the cherubim. How one of the interpretations of the cherubim is that the face is that of a calf or of an ox, and we discussed about how the nation of Israel did not create the golden calf in order to worship the golden calf, but they created it as a way of indicating this is God's presence. Using that same idea, the idea is that the tabernacle, basically God is saying, no, golden calf, not the way to do it. Not the way to do it at all. You don't put up golden calves, you don't set up images, but recognizing that there is a need here. And in fact, if we go back to what we discussed last week, feeling the need where the nation of Israel is saying they don't need a new God, they need a new Moses. What does Moses do for the nation of Israel? Moses interprets God for them. Moses brings God's instruction to them. And that's what they're looking for. So basically, under this idea, the tabernacle serves as a vehicle for God to meet the nation, to speak to the nation, to enable God's message to reach the nation forever by the various activities that will go on in the tabernacle and later in the temple. And of course, there is the sacrifices that human beings bring to God at the tabernacle as a way of communicating with God, as a way of bringing expiation for sins. It's a way of expressing thanksgiving. But the temple itself is a place where you feel God's presence and sometimes even messages. The high priest, for example, has the breastplate through which God was able to send messages to the nation, which we see later on in the book of Judges in particular. So this idea is saying basically that the tabernacle directly grew out of the sin of the golden calf. Now, what I would like to suggest is that really both things are at play here. I don't think you have to say that the tabernacle is out of order, or that the golden calf is written out of order in order to say that the tabernacle itself serves both functions, both as a continuation of Sinai and as a giving the nation of Israel something solid, something a physical kind of place. They will never physically see God, because that's the whole idea of monotheism, of believing in this eternal creator of God that has no body, is not physical, cannot be contained in anything physical. But at the same time, this tabernacle itself enables human beings to focus their attention on a place where then they can feel that there's a more intense God's presence among them. If we look first of all at chapter 25, okay? Chapter 25, verse 22. Here is at the beginning of the instruction for the tabernacle. We see here this purpose of the tabernacle, of this place of meeting. First of all, it's a tent of meeting, but here I'd like to talk specifically about what that word meeting means. It's the word moed or noad in Hebrew. And verse 22, it says as follows: there I will meet you. We're talking about the ark. Okay, there I will meet with you, and I will impart to you from above the cover, from between the two cherubim that are on top of the ark of the covenant, or actually ark of the testimony, that all that I will command you concerning the Israelite people. What God is basically saying is there is a location. There I will meet you. There is a location, and the location is in the Holy of Holies, above the ark, in between the two cherubim. There, God says, I will meet you. Now, I don't think what God is trying to say is I'm physically going to limit myself to this little spot on this box, on this ark, as holy as the ark may be. But what is happening here is that God is putting a place for humanity. Now, God doesn't need a meeting place. God is everywhere. But humanity needs a place. Humanity needs a time and a place, and the actual word here, noadity in Hebrew, which is translated as "there I will meet you," it comes from it comes from the word moed, the word that is later used as the festival of the Lord. If you read in Leviticus, these are the festivals of the Lord. Okay, the word for that is moed. Okay, also it's very related to the word for testimony, edut. It's a very similar word. So first of all, the word moed and the word noad, these words having to do with meeting, it's not just having a meeting. The word itself conveys time and place. When it is used in the context of these are the festivals of the Lord, that word there is meaning these are the times that the Lord has set aside for you to worship and have these festivals. So it's very much time-oriented, not place-oriented. Whereas here, the same word is used more to be place-oriented, not time-oriented. Actually, the word itself, I would argue, is where time and place come together. And that is also very relevant when we talk about the tabernacle. Because in the tabernacle, you don't just come when you want. And in fact, where this location that God is talking about here in verse 22 is a place that only one person, the high priest, beginning with Aaron, can come in only once a year. So it is not just here I will meet you. It is here I will meet you only at the appointed time. And we get that in a sense from the use of that word noad. So here we have very same idea as the revelation at Sinai. It is a particular time, it is a particular place, and it's a meeting with God at that time and at that place. The similarity, though, with this word for edut, for testimony, of course, is very important, because what is the testimony that we are even talking to? When it says here, the ark of the testimony, what is the testimony? The testimony is the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments is what will be placed in this ark. So again, we have this direct connection, not just from the purpose of the tabernacle as a continuation of Sinai, but the actual physical item that God gives to the nation at Sinai will end up in this holy ark, which is built at the time, which is in the tabernacle. Of course, it's the holiest part of the tabernacle is this ark, which is in the Holy of Holies of the tabernacle. Okay, now let's take a look at the very end of our current. This brings us to our Torah portion today, and I just want to end with that. Chapter 40, the very last verses of the Torah portion. It is a beautiful, beautiful few verses. The work is finished. Everyone has done their job. The vessels have been created. The building has been built. The the tent or whatever. And we read as follows, starting from the very middle of verse 33. When Moses had finished the work, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. Moses could not enter the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled upon it, and the presence of the Lord filled the tabernacle. When the cloud lifted from the tabernacle, the Israelites would set out on their various journeys. But if the cloud did not lift, they would not set out until such time as it did lift. For over the tabernacle, a cloud of the Lord rested by day, and fire would appear in it by night, in the view of all the house of Israel throughout the journeys. So first of all, I want to just pay attention to this idea of the cloud lifting and the cloud settling. When the cloud lifted, this was a way that God communicated to the nation, okay, it's time to move. So if we talked before about a place, a meeting place that includes time and place, it is so interesting because here we have the meeting place and the cloud. And here is the place where God is meeting the nation, but he's also designating a time. He is saying, right now is the time that you have to move. Okay. And then the cloud rests, the whole nation rests, and they set up camp. So that's, I thought, a very interesting parallel. But let's take a look at the whole picture here. The tabernacle is completed. Until now, the tabernacle has been a structure. It's with skins, it's with wood, it's the vessels. They build them up. Everything is set. They build it up, not different, of course, according to very specific instructions, but not different from how you have to build anything. It's about artists and artisans and builders and carpenters, etc. And all of a sudden, the building is finished and it is completely changed. It goes from a building to the tent of meeting. It goes from a building that anybody can walk in and out of. All those weeks that they're building this, the artisans are going in and out and in and out, okay? And all of a sudden, the cloud fills the building and Moses cannot go in. Now, what do you mean he can't go in? It's crowded? Is the cloud taking up space? It's crowded? No. The cloud now rests on the tabernacle, which means the presence of God is there, which means the distance has been imposed, which means the rules that we remembered from the revelation at Sinai are here in the tabernacle. You can approach if God beckons you. You can't just walk in. There are rules. There are distances. There is the high priest who can only go in once a year. Moses, who's a completely different situation. God says at the end of the 5 books of Moses, right before, I think it's where it is in Deuteronomy, but it might also be in Numbers, where God says he says, no, I speak face to face with Moses. There's no other man in history that had the kind of communication with God that Moses did. Even Moses, though, can't just walk in. Moses has to be summoned. Okay, and I think where we have here is, what is this tabernacle? We have this, both a place where you meet God, as I said, the people come and they bring their sacrifices, and yet there's that distance, there's that cloud, okay? There's a presence of God that creates rules, that creates a certain kind of awe and fear. It's a very, very holy place with all that goes with it. This is how the book of Exodus ends. And it ends in a very strange way. It ends with Moses outside the tabernacle, a cloud there, and Moses can't go in. That's how it ends. And how does the next book begin? Leviticus, the Lord called to Moses and spoke to him from the tent of meeting. And there's, I don't remember which one of the commentators connects these two together and basically saying there's Moses standing outside the tent of meeting, standing outside of the tabernacle because the cloud is there waiting, and then God summons him and God calls to Moses and speaks to him from the tent of meeting. So that is the paradigm here. Moses is there and has to wait for God to summon him. And then when God summons him, they meet. And at that point, God can then give the instruction to Moses, the teachings to Moses that he will continue to teach to the nation of Israel. Starting next week, we will start our new series, a series on Leviticus. And I have entitled that series, A Kingdom of Priests and a Holy Nation, which is, of course, a quote. And most of the book of Leviticus is details about sacrifices. We're going to have to work hard to find meaning for our own lives today in some of those details. But I believe if we look at also there's a lot about purity and about ways of behavior and morality and all kinds of things in Leviticus. Lots of rules, very short on stories. But what I think if we look as an overview, we have now, at the end of Exodus, we've come to the place where Israel has been restored. The ultimate restoration of Israel is God's presence resting on the tabernacle, creating a permanent vehicle for communication between God and the nation of Israel. Leviticus now takes us into what that relationship looks like. What are the rules? 100%. But what are the vehicles that God offers to mankind to come and meet God in the tabernacle and in our lives in general? So that is what we are going to be taking up next week as we begin our new series, as we begin the book of Leviticus. I know we're finished now, but if anybody has anything to say, any questions to ask, I'd love to hear from you. I'm here.
Sondra, I know it doesn't relate to today's lesson, but how many Egyptians went out with the Israelites when they left? I understand.
Well, I don't know if there's a number anywhere, but it's called the mixed multitude. The mixed multitude went out, and it's not clear who they were exactly. Some people say they were themselves not really Egyptians, but other nations that were in Egypt, let's say the riffraff, or people that were kind of at the edges of society, and so let's attach ourselves to the nation of Israel. Some people say it was Egyptians who really saw the light and wanted to join the nation of Israel. There's different attitudes towards this. Some people blame this mixed multitude for all that went wrong in the desert. In other words, every time the children of Israel sinned, it was the mixed multitude that influenced them. And they brought on, because they really didn't belong. What are they doing there? But
the other guys.
The other guys, right.
Like human nature.
Their fault.
Whatever it is, but it's really not clear. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sondra,
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I just wanted to say thank you. And I've enjoyed every bit of it. I'm happy we're going on to Leviticus.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Diane.
Great teaching.
Now the other Diane.
okay.
Yes, Diane.
Yes. Back to Exodus 25 and 22, the idea of the location, the place.
Yeah.
I think I heard either you or Shmuel say that Hamakom is another name for God.
Yes. Yes.
Usually I hear Hashem, but somebody, I don't remember if it was Shmuel or you, said that Hamakom is also another name for God.
Yes, it is. And it's a post-biblical name for God. I think it's post-biblical, but definitely it's a very, very, you see it in prayers, you see it referred to in many of the sources, Hamakom, which is the place. It's
very interesting.
It's very interesting, but I really appreciate you raising that point. It's a very good point. When you refer to God as the place, it's kind of saying he has no one place. He defines place because he's beyond place. That's the idea. He is the place, which is that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's something that that we use in my church, we are Pentecostal Christians. We speak in tongues. And I remember asking my pastor, because I'm thinking, I said, I don't understand. I said, but I never have any problem. I don't have to work myself up into anything to be speaking in tongues. And she just dismissed. Oh, she says, you're always at the place.
Oh, okay.
And this is something that comes up in our, churches have vocabulary, right. And that's part of our vocabulary is to be at the place.
Well, that's great. That's great.
This is
in his presence. Yeah.
That's great. Anyone have any other comments?
So how do we translate today's lesson onto, because I had to make some drawings here. So I have the mountain of Sinai, and then that moves to the tabernacle, right?
Right, right.
So what would be in today's experience something similar? So where do we meet? Where do we experience?
Oh, you're saying, where do we experience God today?
Like,
I
yeah.
think I would say that we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about this next
Okay.
week, actually. I'm going to do, our first talk on Leviticus is going to be what are sacrifices and how can we relate to them. And I think we're in a different place than the people were of the ancient world. They had needs that we no longer have for this physical sort of thing, because they were coming out of pagan worship. And we're already so many centuries away from pagan worship. We have a much easier time dealing with the sublime and with the inanimate and with something that we can't touch and feel. It's easier for us. And I think that's, some of what, we're dealing with. What God needed to offer the nation at that time, we can learn, we need to draw the messages, but I think we're already in a different place.
Yeah. But then again, the idolatry persists because
in a different way.
Yeah.
Right. But it's a different
Exactly.
idolatry. In other words, how many of you take a look, like you go to a store and you want to buy a little figurine of something, okay? Would any of you even occur to you that this little figurine is going to be a god?
Yes.
It wouldn't even occur to you. You buy a little figurine because it's a pretty thing to put on your dresser. We're just not there anymore. Our idolatry has moved on to completely different things.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sondra,
well, I'm
can
glad we're going to hear the other piece. Thank you.
you see my background picture? It's the
Oh, yes. There
it's
you
a
go.
model of the tabernacle in the wilderness.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for putting that on.
I also have the ark, picture of the model of the ark. Have you been there? Have you visited the tabernacle?
In which one? In Almog or in Tamar? Which one? I don't think
it's
the only tabernacle model that I've been at is the one at Shiloh.
Oh no, this is very close to Eilat. It's really down in the area where Solomon's copper mines are.
Yeah, Timnah.
Timnah, yes, that's it.
That's great. Well, but I encourage all of you, when you can come back to Israel, I would love to take you to Shiloh, because that, of course, is where the tabernacle actually stood after they entered Israel. And there's
I have been there.
Model there.
Yes,
Anyway.
it is beautiful.
All right. Anyway, I'm going to say goodbye for now. I don't want to keep you any longer. Please, we're going to put out an email to everyone, and we'll ask you to sign up again if you want to continue with the Leviticus. And it's an opportunity for people who aren't part of the group yet to start something new. And I hope we'll see you all next week, and hopefully a few more as well.
I hope you enjoyed that video, and we'd like to be sure you're getting all of our video content. So just click on the subscribe button below, as well as on the notification bell, and that way you will have easy access to all our material. We look forward to staying in touch with you. God bless you, and have a wonderful day.